Hello, my name is Scott Allen. I'm going to be filling in for Dave McCormick today as your host on today's Alpha Anywhere Q&A. Today, we're going to be talking about responsive layouts with the new CSS Grid Container. I think it's pretty exciting, and Sarah has a lot to share with you about it. So I will pass it on over to her now. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Scott.
All right, well, I'm going to give you the screen here.
All right. If you have any questions today, please type them into the questions box to go to webinar control panel, and you are always welcome at any time during the week to send your questions to guides@alphasoftware.com. So today, yes, we are going to be talking about the CSS Grid Container. And the CSS Grid Container is a new control we added in a recent release of Alpha Anywhere. At the end of December, we put out a new release, and it has this new container in it, and it's a very exciting container. It's based on something called the CSS Grid Layout, which is a concept in CSS. And what it allows you to do is build this two-dimensional layout consisting of rows and columns. And it's a great alternative to using table markup for building page layouts. So I'm sure a lot of you know or have seen or heard of the table tag in HTML, and it's very often used, or at least used to be used, to create layouts of web pages where you like put your header in a row and then maybe make a few columns so you could create center content, put things on the side, and then use additional rows to do other things. And I have seen within Alpha Anywhere in the past, I've done this myself. I have a UX control, or I have a UX component, or maybe a grid, and I've got some controls and I want them in a very specific layout. And I have been guilty of using the freeform control and throwing table tags in there to get what I want, because if you know how to do it that way, it's just so easy to reach out to that. But CSS Grid is an alternative to that. And instead of putting all these table markup into your layout to create the layout you want, you can use CSS instead to define it. And what the CSS Grid Container does is it handles all that code on the back end, all the CSS that needs to be written and created to define those rows and columns and spacing, and instead gives you a GUI where you can add your controls that are inside the container and position them in the layout how you want them, how many rows you want them to span, columns, how wide those rows and columns are. You can even overlap controls. Don't necessarily recommend that if they're data collection controls and they're going to be hiding buttons and stuff, but it doesn't prevent you from doing that. So as with any other container, our CSS Grid Container can be embedded in containers. It can contain other containers. Now, be aware that some containers, it might get a bit weird with like a repeating section. I know repeating section is very, very special in that it's a data-bound container that repeats rows. And I believe you can put a CSS Grid, put a repeating section in a CSS Grid container, but if you do it the other way, you might get something you didn't anticipate. So just be aware that that particular container doesn't like having other containers embedded in it is basically the thing I'm getting at there. So, but everything else, cards, putting grids in panels. I don't think you'd want to put a panel in a grid. I don't think that works, but that all works the same. So we're just gonna go straight to the live demo. I know Scott said I have a lot of great things to talk about, and I do, but it's really the visualization here I think is going to help a lot of you. So what I'd like to do today is we're gonna build a list, and it's a detail view, and our end goal on this detail view is to get this really nice layout that we'll see in this preview here. So we have our customer ID, a company name. I'll select something, contact, address, city, region, country, and then our save and reset buttons. Now, if you are experienced with Alpha Anywhere and you look at this, you may think, oh, well, I could put I would make this 30% wide. I would put these on the same line. Maybe I'd have this fill out the rest of the 70% of the screen, 50 and 50. 100%, maybe this is 50 and these are both 25. I've removed the breaks after these things, and then these buttons would go on the next line. Somehow centered, I'd probably put it in a container. But with the new CSS Grid Container, it literally looks like this. in your layout. So let's go take a look at how we built this list and got these controls for a detail view. So I've got a new UX over here, which I created by going to New and selecting Web Component, and then selecting UX and starting with a blank UX. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a list control using add control over here on the side. So we'll type in list. This interface lets you search for controls, and given that we have over 100, it makes it a lot easier to find things. And I'm just going to keep the defaults. We'll go with the list quick setup Genie, and what I'm going to do is connect this to the Northwind database, which is this AA demo Northwind connection string. Everyone has access to this. It's very easy to create. If you're in, let's see here, let's go edit save connections. Here's the Alpha DAO connections string dialog. If you don't have this, there will be a link at the bottom that says create AA demo Northwind connection string. Click that button. We've been defaulting it to SQLite lately to encourage people to use that instead of Access. I'm going to make a clean copy. And then that's it. That's all we need. I've got a database I can work against now. So we'll use that. And then the table we're going to work off is the customers, which we use a lot in a lot of our examples. On the fields here, I'm going to just grab everything. We'll click select all, click OK. And then down here in the detail view, I'm going to say, yeah, it has a detail view. I'm going to accept all the defaults here so we can take a look at what gets generated for us. I'm going to remove the container because we're going to add that ourselves later, and this sort of just simplifies that process a bit. Then I'm going to click OK, and then that's our list and all the controls. If we go in and we live preview this now, it's not going to look great. Everything's going to be in one column, but you'll see that at the top we'll have our list, and underneath that we have all of our name fields. And if I click on something here, it automatically populates the detail view. And then I've got a few buttons down here I can use to create a new record, delete this record, or save, reset my changes. And then synchronize is what you do at the end of the day when you've made a bunch of changes in your list and you want to save those back to your database on the server. So what I want to do here is we're going to clean up this list a bit so it only has a few columns. We'll put this in a side-by-side layout using panels, and then we're going to design our interface for the detail view to only contain the fields we want to see and have that nice layout that we saw in the live preview earlier. So first, we're going to select everything, and we're going to put it inside of a panel layout. And what a panel layout is a container for panels. An app can have one or more panels in it. If you just have one panel, you can just put one panel card in and it's fine, it'll work. But if you want to use multiple panel cards, which are representations of individual screens or layouts on your screen, they have to be inside of a panel layout container control type of panel or a panel navigator, and that just defines how those screens or portions of your screens are laid out. So we'll do a layout. We'll click OK to insert the opening and closing tag. Next, we'll select our list to add a panel card, and we're going to insert it around our selected list control, so that list is inside the panel. And then we're going to select all of these guys and add another panel card and click OK. Then that gives us our layout. So now what we'd like to do is remove some of those columns in the list, because right now this is going to split the screen half and half. And if you remember in that first preview we looked at, a list was very, very wide and had a lot of columns. Those are not going to look so great in a half screen size. So let's take some of those columns out in our preview. So what I did here is I double clicked it to open the list builder. You can get to this also by going through list properties over here. And we're going to come over to list layout. And I'm just going to remove a few of these fields that we don't really need. So we'll take out, we'll keep country, we'll keep city, we'll keep company name, and customer ID. So we'll keep those 4 columns. Click OK. And then we'll just take a quick look at it now, so you can see how this is coming together. So here we go. Here's my list on the left, my controls on the right, which are scrolling still. It's not great. I do want people to be able to see all this stuff up top, and it doesn't make any sense to only utilize half of the space here. when I have so much more room. And another thing to note here is that this list is crunched up at the top, and that's because it has a specific height and width. We can change this so it fills the container, and so we'll do that as we go back in here and start working out what our layout looks like in panel card 2. So to start, on list layout, there's this box you can check. It's called Fill Container. It will fill the container it's in. So if it's in a panel card, it'll fill it completely. If it's in a container control, just a normal container, it'll fill it up. When you use this property, you cannot have anything else in that container or panel card with the list. You'll get a warning because the list is going to just cover that stuff up. So you want to make sure it's the only thing in that container or panel. Now with panels, if you want to have something in like a header or footer, you can use the header and footer containers in a panel to add that to a card that has a list that's filling it, and those will render in the places that you expect it to render. Moving on to the bottom part, we're going to use the new CSS Grid, and we're going to create a little view, but we don't necessarily want all these controls here that were added for us. So I'm going to take some of them out now because there's no point in keeping them around if we don't want to use them in our layout. And the ones I want to take out are the phone number information, and I'm just going to delete the selected objects. We'll take out the postal code. We'll take out this placeholder for global errors. Now in development, it is helpful to keep that around somewhere when you're developing your application, just to make sure that you catch any problems as you're building things. So we'll take that out. And then the only two buttons I want to keep here are save and reset. So we'll take out new record and delete, and we'll take synchronize out for now. We can add that back in later if we wanted to keep it. And so using these controls, we're going to create that new layout that we want with a CSS Grid Container. So a CSS Grid Container is a type of container, and you're going to find it down here in Containers. And it's created when you add a container control. So you can either go through Containers Container here, or you can search and add control for container. But the container control is what you're adding, and the CSS Grid is a type of container control. So once you've added the container, you then have to select your type. The default is none. Panel header and panel footer are types of containers, and CSS Grid is the new one that we've added. So we're going to add that. And so at this point, what I've got is a CSS Grid container, and all these controls are within it, which means these are the controls I can position within that layout. So to access the layout builder, you can double click on the opening tag for the CSS Grid container, or you can come over here to the CSS Grid Container layout and click this button here. We call it the Smart Field button. And this will open up the Grid Container Builder. And by default, you should see 4 columns and 3 rows represented by these boxes. The boxes have a red border. I assume you guys can see this. I don't know if I can make it bigger because this is all like 1 pixel wide, but the way this works is you click on one of these boxes and it displays a list of controls you can choose from. And so on this first one, let's add the customer ID. So this is customer ID. It's going to occupy this first column, and it's not going to span any more than that. You have controls over here where you can control that. So maybe you don't want it in column 1, maybe you want it in column 2. So you can click the plus button to move it, minus button to move it back. There's this first, middle, and last could kind of try to position things. It's going to be a little imperfect on middle because middle on an even value it's got to pick one side. So it may appear on the left or the right here, but we want this in the front. And then on the next one, let's add the company name. And let's change this one so it spans 3 columns, which is done using column span, and we can just click the plus button to expand it. So that's the first line. You'll see here that getting this set up is pretty simple. You know, contact name and contact title, I want these both to span 2 columns on the second row. And that's all I have to do there. Address is going to occupy the entire 3rd row. And I believe if I click width, yep, width will go all the way to the end and then fill the whole thing. And now I've got city, region, country, and then 2 buttons, which need to go on 2 additional rows. So to add 2 more rows, I'll just click this plus button up here to add them. I'll put city here, on the 4th row, and we'll have it span 2 columns. Let's put region here and country on the last column. And then down here in the middle, let's put save and reset. So there's save, and that's reset. And now if we preview this, that's our layout. That's the whole thing. So let's click OK and look at that. And there we go. There's our customer ID, the company name, our contact information, their address, city, the region, if applicable. Regions aren't always applicable, their country, and then our save and reset buttons. In terms of responsiveness, if we make this smaller, you'll see that these, as I move it, see how these get a little bit wider and a little bit smaller as I come in. Now, if you shrink this up really small, things might start to get unreadable. But as you can see here, it's doing a pretty good job. This is as small as I can make this window. The container, the CSS Grid Container, you can use it in your web and your mobile apps. A caution on using it in mobile, your screen real estate is limited. So while it is responsive and it will grow to expand and contract within the boundary region you've given it, if you're trying to squeeze a lot of data on a line, it may become unreadable on small form factors. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying you can't use it, it's just a design consideration to make sure that your data is still readable, your app is still usable, and people can use it easily. Which in that case, it may make more sense to do just a column of properties on each line. So that's CSS Grid Container. I did want to talk a little bit about specifying the column sizes. So you can specify size information in here in a few places. One is in the column gap. This is the space between each column. The bigger you make it, the more space you're going to see here between the controls. It defaults, I think, to 2 pixels here. There we go. And the same with the row gap. That's going to be the distance between each. So if you want a little more breathing room in here, you can use these settings to change that. I set it back to normal. Oop. Oh, it looks like I have to use these. There we go. And then the other 2 things to look at are column sizes and row sizes. So by default, the column sizes are computed automatically as, if you have 4 columns and it's 400 pixels wide, it's going to decide that each column is 100 pixels wide, give or take your column gaps. That approximation, that calculation to figure out, what those columns sizes are is called a fractional unit, and it's represented using the CSS size FR. And if we click here and click define column sizes, you'll see that mentioned down here. So if we wanted to, and say like maybe customer ID is always 100 pixels wide, in that first column is always 100 pixels wide, no matter the screen size. You can come in here and you can say 100px and assign the column width to that first column that way. Now, the definition here is defined as column 1, column 2, column 3 as you add them. So if you have 1 value, you're defining the first column. If you have 2 values, you're defining the first and second column. We tell you what the default is, this 1FR, so that if you've decided that, hey, actually, I want a fixed second column, but the first one is fine, it can grow as it needs, you could do 1FR 100px. Oops. So that's how you would define that. Anything that doesn't have a definition, so if you only put 1 or 2 values in here, the remaining columns are just going to use the default, so you don't have to have a specification for that. And then similarly, if you add more columns, you don't need to come in here and update it unless you're adding more columns and shifting everything over, then you probably would. So let's add that 100 on our column here, and then we'll also go and talk about row sizes briefly. Row size also uses a relative sizing. In this case, we default it to auto. So the height of the row is determined from the content within it. And you can change that here. You can give it a specific height. The content within it here in this case is going to be these text boxes and these buttons. Whatever the height is specified in those control definitions, that's going to be the height of the row. Again, the definition starts with the first row, which is the top, and comes down as you enter values in. So if you wanted to do something like, say, the last row, so we have 5 rows here, maybe we want the last row to have a height of 100 pixels. We could come in here and say auto, 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 which is 4 autos, and then the 5th row, 100 px. So that'll give it a fixed height. I'll click OK. So that's column row sizes. Let's take a look at that real quickly here. So here's customer ID. You see that it only occupies this width here. Let me unmaximize that and wiggle it a bit. So you can see it's got the same width, and as we make this larger, everything else grows, but it stays the same. Down here, it's a little bit harder to see because save and reset are anchoring to the top of that row. But if I can grab this guy, if I hover over this with, I should show you what I just did. I opened the Chrome debugger, which is this button down here, and then I clicked this box up here. And what this is the element selector, and you can use this to come in here and click on things. So when you hover over your CSS Grid container, what you're going to see are dotted lines representing the rows and columns. And what I just want to show here is that this bottom row, which we gave a height of 100 pixels to, is 100 pixels tall. Now we'd have to do some extra work with save and reset to try to get them to anchor to the bottom of the row if we want them to be down further. But I just wanted to show you guys that this is what the output is generated. And then if you look at everything else here, you'll see all those other rows have exactly the same height because they're using the auto. So that's the CSS Grid Container in a little bit of a nutshell. You can do a lot with it. I wanted to pull up the documentation page for you guys and share
While you're
that in the
pulling
chat.
that up, Sarah,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you may.
Great.
There we go.
So you were showing how you could make some things fixed widths and other things leaving to auto. I didn't see in the built-in documentation on the app itself, I did not see anything related to percentages. Can you write in percentages as a definition of width?
I believe you can. So the way I understand that this works is that you can put any value in here that is supported by the CSS Grid sizing stuff for the rows and the columns. And if you're in the documentation, we do link into the CSS Grid Layout over on MDN if you want to learn more about that technology, how it works, how it's implemented. But it has this is like what gets generated on the back end. But grid template columns and grid template rows is the property that maps to. And I believe you can use any of the, let's look at it real quick. Of the allowed values in there. So you could use pixel. I think you can use really any CSS size. Here's one that uses 20%. So yeah, I believe you can do percentages in there for sure. There's a few other things in here like repeat, fit content, min max. Here we go, list of values. So yeah, you can use percentages. You can use a length, any CSS length value, auto. And then flex is that fractional unit FR. With the rows, you're going to probably want to use auto unless you've given your container a specific height, in which case flex might work out for you. But for sure, here's rows.
I can see how this could be a very useful tool. Definitely, if you were trying to create something that had a very, very specific alignment and shape that you needed to maintain consistently, this would be highly useful. So pretty cool.
Well, and certainly in the context of this picture here is showing the button on the left and the button on the right. To set that up previously, you had to put a container and then you had your buttons and you had to like a tab spacer or something like that, or two containers and a tab spacer, and one was anchored on the left. It gets messy really, really fast trying to use other methods, which is why some people reach out to using tables in a freeform layout, or you know, writing a bunch of CSS and stuff like that just to get there. So this really makes it a lot simpler to build these types of layouts in Alpha Anywhere.
Neat. Well, Ara, did you want to answer a question? We do have one, it appears, at the moment. We could also take more if folks are willing to write them in. Oh, it looks like we have a few more than I saw. My apologies.
Yeah, for sure. Any questions?
Yeah, quite a few more.
Questions
Sorry.
about CSS Grid, and you know, if you have questions about other features, go ahead and ask them. That's what we're here for. And that's what the last half of this webinar is going to be dedicated to today.
All right, great. Well, questions. The first one that came along was asking about if you could make each record a 2 or 3 row setup in the list. And I think they were elaborated on that, saying that list row having 3 lines for different fields. So a multi-lined field.
Is the question, hold on, I need to close this guy.
Sure.
To have, like, instead of having this row and column layout, to have a multi-line layout for your list, yes, you can do that. One of the ways you can do that is with a freeform layout on the list. If you come into your list properties and you scroll down into layout properties, you can change the layout type from column to freeform, which gives you full control over the entire layout. Now, you won't have column headings anymore, but this will allow you to create a layout with that multi-row. And we do have some predefined templates here that you can pick from. Again, that link is down here at the bottom left-hand corner of the layout builder. But we have a bunch in here that do a little bit of that. A few more templates you can look into for card headings. These are more interactive. But that's one way you can do it. I'm just gonna pick random fields for each one of these. Click OK. So we can take a look at that real quick. So that's more of a multi-line layout. Now you might not like this. The freeform layouts are built using client-side templating, which is a Alpha Anywhere markup for defining layouts that can be interactive, dynamic. It's really slick. It also uses HTML and CSS. The other thing you can do, if you want to keep those columns, I'll come back to list properties here and change this back to the column layout, is on the list layout, you can have these things here, but over here under template, you can actually open this up, and maybe you want, this is an HTML editor, but maybe you want underneath the customer, you would like to list their phone number, so you can insert the placeholder for phone number. Click OK, and so now this column, when it renders, will be the customer ID followed by a break, which creates a new line with the phone number control underneath. Click OK and live preview that. So that still gives you your columns for sorting if that's something you want to keep, while allowing you to add additional lines. If you have like a long column and you want it to wrap, that's the other thing that I'm thinking of that might be being asked here, is in the list layout under fields, there's this word wrap setting. If you turn that on for your longer fields, if they're truncating, this will wrap the text to the next line and actually make that list row taller so you can see all the content.
Great. I have another. Does the CSS Grid Container allow you to set a background color, say for a required field or something of that nature?
Yeah, I believe so. Oh, for a required field. So yeah, any on the fields and stuff like that, if you've got like a required field or you want to do styling on the individual controls, that's still all done through the controls like you would anywhere else. If you're asking if you can put like a background color on the entire container, yes. The container still has a style. You can assign it class names. You can give it a width and a height like you can with any other container control.
Cool. Let's see. I think the other ones were mostly, from which build does this become available in?
The most recent ones. The one we did on Christmas was the first one that had it. Let me look that up real quick. Boop. Actually, what am I doing? It's right here. It's in Alpha Anywhere 4.6.3.9 or above. So in Alpha Anywhere, if you go into Help and About, and you see 4.6.3.9 or 4.6.4, then you have it. But 3.9 is the first version, the first release that was available in. And again, that information is right here at the top of the documentation page for it.
Great. I think that does run through the questions that we had for now. So, oh wait, no, I did have one other one here. Sorry. Is there a maximum number of rows that are supported?
As many as will render on your browser. I don't think there's any limitation on that. I haven't sat here and clicked the plus button to see if it maxes out, but I don't think there's any limitation on the number of rows. If you're trying to go with infinite rows, you might run into rendering problems with slow application if you're putting a ton of stuff in there, but no, there's no limit.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's it for our questions for now. If you do have questions, as always, send them to guides@alphasoftware.com, and we will try to get to those. Is there some other stuff that you wanted to cover? Oh, wait, it looks like I see another one coming in here. Float above label type disappears in the CSS grid. Why?
That's a good question. I don't know why it does that, but we could take a peek at it and see if we can. Let's add a new control here. Text box. There we go. So we're going to make the label position float above. And what this means is that the label will be rendered inside the text box control until you click in it, in which case it will animate up above the text box to appear above. So the same behavior as we see with just a label above the text box. Otherwise, if the control is, if you leave the control and there's no value in it, it'll come back inside. If it has a value, it renders above it. So we'll click OK. And float above. Let's just do a quick preview here. There's our float above, and it does disappear. So what might be happening here is because the row height has been auto-calculated from the size of this control initially, it may not be accounting for that new height as it becomes taller. So what you may need to do is either come in here and let's add a new line here. Add a row. Add float above text box down here. What you may need to do is either give it an explicit height. So if we know how tall text boxes are in Alpha Anywhere. They all have a known height, and I'll show you how to figure that out right now. Using the Chrome debugger. So we'll click this guy and we'll come down here and we'll click on this guy. And when we select it, over here on the side, there's this computed section, and it tells us its height. I think down here somewhere, height 46 pixels. So as it disappears, perhaps what we need to do is actually just tell it that this row needs to be taller. So that's our 6th row. So instead of 46, we can do something like 80 to give it room. We can certainly investigate it too on our end to see if we can make that easier for you. Oh, it still disappears. Look at that. So yeah, I don't fully know. I wasn't aware that it disappeared either. But that's a good question, and we'll send that off to the development team to take a look at for you. Whoop. It's gotten awfully quiet here. I think Scott's still muted. I'm going to look through the questions here. It looks like there's one person mentioned that I did forget to add that first line in the CSS grid. Do I have to do it all over again, or can I insert a row? I can insert a row. Now, if we wanted that to be at the top, what we would have to do is come in here and change the starting row for everything else to move it down one, which is tedious. I do recognize that. The rows are always added to the bottom, but you can come in here and just click the plus button for each thing, and probably want to start with the lowest row first, just so that you can see it move down. But it takes a minute to move all this stuff down. Oops, starting row. There we go. And then down there, and then this guy can go all the way back to the top, which is the first. And then I do want to come in here on the row sizes, and I want to take 80 off of the end, put it on the front, because that's where I just moved my control. And then that puts that guy at the top. And there's our float above. Someone did mention that you can change your float above settings in the properties. So we'll go find that right now. This can be a bit difficult to locate things because it is a long list with a lot of stuff. So one trick you may want to add to your bag is this find properties, and then you can search for float and then find property, and it will jump right to it and select it for you. But if we come in here, margin above, let's just click OK there and see if that gives us the behavior we wanted. No, it did not. Anyway, thanks for that suggestion. So if there are no other questions about CSS Grid, does anybody have any questions about anything else, other new features that we've added? I know we've got a new code control, which we're planning on covering next week. So that should be exciting. It's an interface for capturing a code like a two-factor authentication set of numbers, and it provides visual animation that you can utilize to notify the user that their password is wrong or their code is wrong. Wouldn't be their password, would be their code. Something with a fixed length. Someone has asked what the status on the list calendar control is. I don't know. I don't have a release date for that. It's been in beta for a while. I do acknowledge that it's been a long while. We do have a layout for the list that's been in development for a while. It would let you display all of your list data in a calendar type layout, like you think a Google Calendar or maybe like a weekly day planner. That's been in development. If you're interested in using it, fair warning, in development means that you're going to have to set it up using JavaScript and JSON, but we do have documentation for that. We're always looking for more feedback about it. And if you send us an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, we are more than happy to get you a feature key and point you in the direction to start using it.
Hi, Sarah. Sorry about that. If you noticed, I dropped out. I was having some connection issues. Yes, my apologies.
No webinar.
Thank you. Yeah,
is without its perils.
I know.
Yeah.
Who knew it could be so dangerous?
Yep.
Yeah, but you're doing such a great job without me. So
I've got some experience.
yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I'm just trying to catch up and gain some of that experience as well.
Yep. We don't need Dave. We're good without him.
Yeah.
There are some more questions coming in here. I do want to.
Yes.
Somebody asked a question. How do they set alternating row colors, but they lose the highlighting? We can take a look at that. I don't know if I can answer how you can get the row highlighting back. I do know that row highlighting is done through the web through the web theme using CSS. So in the list properties, if you have a list using a column layout, you can specify alternating background colors. And let me see if I can figure out where that is. Here we go, alternating row color. So we turn that on. What you can do here is it just lets you pick the even color and the odd color. Let's go with Farmington here. Do green, and then this is gonna look great with the aqua. Yellow. There we go. The question is that they've lost the row highlighting and they want to get both. So let's take a look at that real quick. So yeah, you do lose the background row highlighting. So I suspect that's happening because the way we've done this is you can see that even the odd row color are probably being added at the list row level. And because of that, it's going to overwrite whatever is in the style sheet because of how CSS loads and how that works. So a better solution here, instead of using alternating row color, or maybe not a better solution, but a different solution would be to extend the CSS style sheet for your web theme, whichever one you're using, to add in a class name definition for alternating rows and columns, and that is done using CSS selectors. So if we go over to MDN and even selectors or CSS class, yeah, it's selector. So here is the selectors. We are looking for pseudo classes, which is a whole category of cool things you can do with CSS. And two of the ones that would be interesting for you to check out, and we can certainly talk more about this if you, in a later webinar, or if you want to send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, I can point you at the ones to pick. Let's see, even, odd, and I think it is nth child. Yeah, it's nth child. So you use this, so you would have something like, you would have a CSS definition, something like alternating row color. And in here you would use, it would be colon nth child even for even rows, and odd for odd rows, and that's going to be some count based on wherever it starts. I don't know if row counting and this starts at 0 or 1. It starts at 1, so like the first row would be odd, the second row would be even. But you use this to set up your color definition, and then the third piece of that would just be to make sure that your hover background color. I know this is seems like a lot of work. Hover is also a CSS color selector here, or pseudo class. But then here you could tell it to just use your background color defined in the style theme. So you'd add it here. Someone has also offered a solution suggesting you can use the on item draw of the list to set the background color. The thing I'm going to say on that is just setting element.style background color to that specific color is not going to solve the issues with the hover, because it's being defined incredibly locally. So that hover rule is still going to get overwritten by what you've put on that row. So, and that's background. Oh, I'm being told it does work with hover. So let's try that. Learn something new every day. All right. So this is what I was sent in the chat. Thank you for sending this. There's an on item draw. Open up this event. This is defined using JavaScript, and this is what was sent. A let style background color. Wait, let's see here. Ella is the element that contains the data. So if the index, which is the row number mod 2, which is divide by 2, what's the remainder? It's either going to be 0 or 1. So if it's 0, it'll be white. If it's 1, it's light gray. Oh, I didn't delete the other colors out of there. Let's go fix that first. List properties. Turn that off. Click OK. It doesn't seem to be, the suggestion doesn't really seem to be working. We will investigate this more. I apologize for not having a solution for you. But that's a good question, and I'm sure you're not the only person. Oh, it sounds like I broke something. Let's go look at the list events again. Oh. It didn't save what I pasted. Let's try that again. I must have clicked cancel. So it does still do the hover, but it's not doing the background color, which I think is the original question. So it's a good alternative to setting up CSS though, if you're trying to set the background color. Let's see here. Are there any other questions? And I do thank everyone for being here today. I'm not feeling 100% this week. I got my booster shot and it is hitting me hard today. Someone did ask, goes back to the CSS Grid Layout and FR, and asking about it. Does it give it? It gives you effective percentages. Yes. Something I left out about defining FR is you can do 1 FR, but you could also do something like 3 FR. And what FR is it takes whatever remaining space that hasn't been allocated to something specific, like 100 pixels, and it splits it evenly across all the FR units that have been defined. So if you have 400 pixels of space left and you've defined a cumulative total of 4 FR units, maybe 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, then each one of those FRs gets 100. If you've defined it, but over 3 columns, so maybe you have 1 FR, 1 FR, 2 FR, the first 2 will get the 100 pixels apiece, but the third one will get 200 because it's 2 units of what's remaining after giving 1 unit to the other 2. So hopefully that makes some sense. And one of the advantages of FR is that it works well with those pixel values, those explicit sizes, whereas percentage is going to be a percentage of the total width, and FR is going to be a portion of what is remaining that hasn't already been allocated to something else. And it spans it spans the full width of the container. So if that fixed width is in the middle, it will split up the remaining cumulative width amongst everything else on either side. So we are running out of time, but we do have 8 minutes left if anybody else has a question. Otherwise, I think we could wrap it up. I do thank everyone for coming this week. I look forward to talking to you next week about the enter code control, and what we're specifically going to do in next week's webinar is we're going to show you how to use it out of the box. It doesn't really do anything for you other than look pretty to get the behaviors, the validation, and then such as like capturing a 2-factor authentication code and then doing something with that. That's on you to hook up because that could be used in so many different ways. We've left that piece for you to decide how to handle it. So I do hope you guys can join us next week. I hope you have a chance to try out the new release. If you're looking to update to the new release, I do recommend that you install the new release side by side with your existing product if you've got something in production, and do testing just to make sure your product works before rolling it out. Both the development environment and all of the application servers support installing 2 different versions side by side. We have documentation on how to do that. If you have questions about it, feel free to email us at guides@alphasoftware.com. Strongly encourage people to test things because we want to make sure that you're not getting in a situation that's not great for you either. So, but yeah, definitely try it out. Yeah, if there's nothing else, Scott, do you want to?
Yeah, I did just want to add one thing before we depart, and that is that please come over to our YouTube channel and find this webinar in the next 48 hours or so. It should be up on the YouTube channel. But then also, you can find all of our previous webinars and so much more there. So please make use of that. And of course, learn.alphasoftware.com, where you can find trainings about all kinds of skills that you may wish to enhance.
And specifically on this, I always want to call this out now. We're going fully serious on this, all in. Over the next couple of months, we are going to be adding new courses here. We are going to be moving all of our tutorial content out of documentation up here, the stuff that we want to keep, the stuff that we think has value and teaches you something useful. So keep an eye on this site. It's not only just new courses for people. The content we're targeting right now is people using Community Edition, but it's with an eye for getting you up and running and to your goal as quickly as possible. So it's going to be applicable to everyone. Some of the intro content you probably already know if you've been using Alpha Anywhere for a while, but we're going to be targeting content for charts, maps, building out dashboards, web services, building mobile apps, that kind of stuff. So keep an eye on this space, and also keep, if you're interested in, if you didn't get to come to DevCon 2021 and there's a presentation you're interested in, and if you want to, you know, see the whole thing, you can access that here as well. So
great. All right, so is that it for you, Sarah?
that's it for me. Thank everybody.
All right.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll catch you all next week. And as always, if you have questions throughout the week, send them into guides@alphasoftware.com, and we will see you next week. Probably Dave will be back by then, but if not, I'll be here to host then too.
And I'll be here as well.
As always. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, all.